All right. Got me? All right, we're good. Cool. Thanks, y'all. Thanks a lot. And thanks for the intro. This is like kind of a dream. This is so cool. Like, I just want to say I'm pumped. Thanks to everyone for being here. All right. So who am I? My name's Devin. All my computer friends call me Divey. You can find me on the app at divey.zone. So yeah, I'm on the Blue Sky team. I started the month that the sale of Twitter finalized. I did not realize we were building an app when I joined the team. But yeah, I work on the app. I work on PDS hosting. I work on auth. End up contributing, working a lot with the protocol team, doing a bunch of protocol design work. Help run a couple of the engineering teams. And I am in the situation room when things break. So by the way, Jazz, I handed the pager to you for the duration of my talk. Oh, there's Jazz. Just so you know, I figure you might want to know that. But in general, outside of Blue Sky, you know, I have ties to open source, the early Node ecosystem. In particular, like been hacking on various pieces of the puzzle in the application stack, from like database libraries to web frameworks, very involved in Happy.js, if anyone's come across that. And like pretty much for my whole life, I've been inspired by the ideals and technologies of the web. I am an HTTP apologist through and through. And that's kind of what I bring to Blue Sky. That's like the perspective I bring to my work. But yeah, all in all, like I've always kind of bridged like, all right, here's the low-level protocol details, and here's how people are building apps. Like that's just been the theme pre-Blue Sky and at Blue Sky, and I just care a ton about how we build and like what options are available for people to build. So that's a little bit about me. So yeah, that said, let's talk a little bit about what it means to build apps on AppProto. So we're gonna, this is like, I want to sit in the seat of someone building an app. Like we're gonna forget a lot of what we know about the protocol in this talk. But that said, I do think it is pretty important to be aware of, you know, some context around the protocol. Like, you know, we are situated there. There's like there's some important details going on here. So, you know, here we're looking at some of the incumbent platforms. And this is kind of a progression from left to right. This is, you know, when I think about the protocol, sometimes I feel the complexity wash over me. And then other times I think about what it's doing and it feels really natural and simple. And when I'm feeling that way, this is what I'm picturing in my head. This is what I'm picturing what the protocol does. So the idea here is all along, you know, these incumbent platforms, somewhere in there are my posts and my friends, right? It's like this data isn't really the product itself. It's kind of related, but they're kind of embedded in there. And one way to think about this is that they kind of have a monopoly on our posts and our friends, right? And they use this technique of tying that data to their platform to keep us there, to keep us on their properties. So the insight of the protocol is to say, hey, hosting has been a thing kind of all along, or at least this is how I think about it. Hosting has always been a thing. It has just been tied to the incumbent platforms. And what the protocol does is say, hey, my posts, my friends, I kind of want to punch those out of the platforms, hoist them out into somewhere connected to me. And so when you start to think about things that way, to say, hey, I want to take all my posts and friends, all my data, and kind of separate it out from the platforms, what's left, right? And something I want to encourage folks to keep in the back of their head as we talk today is like, if you were in the position of one of these incumbents, how would you approach this? Say that you kind of punched the source of truth for this data out of your app. How would you react to that? How would you refactor? Like, how would you think about that? The other thing I like about this framing is this is iterative, right? This takes something we're familiar with. We kind of understand how you build web applications, like Twitter and Facebook. We have a sense for what goes into that. And say, hey, what if we just made this little tweak? What if we punched out the kind of primary source data out? How would that change how we build? So it's not a full rethinking, right? Like if you look at it this way, we're not completely rethinking application development. So, but let's think, like what would you do if that were happening? So there are some implications to to having punched out the primary source data out of the applications. And sometimes it feels like this, it looks like this. This is actually a very useful diagram from a paper we put out about usable decentralized social. But actually, from the perspective of someone building applications, you don't necessarily need to think about all that. Or at least when you're getting into it, your task is not to understand the full network and all its very interesting corners and all the cool stuff going on. You just, step one is getting situated and trying to figure out how to build. Sometimes I joke that we took, if you're familiar with Martin Kleppmann's turning the database inside out write-up, sometimes, and talk actually, sometimes I think we just, I joke that we took that way to its logical extreme in kind of designing out what the network should look like. But anyways, all the everything here, it flows from, it really does flow from this one change. It goes, how do we make this work? How do we make this little incremental change work? What are the details that allow that to happen? You get this. But today, a little me time for the application devs. We're gonna sit in the driver's seat as someone building an application and look at the network just kind of from that perspective. So instead of this bird's eye view of here's everything going on, instead, I'm building an app. The network is kind of this abstract thing out here. There's some details we'll have to use, but kind of this big abstract thing out here, and what's going on? How am I building? This little guy on the left, maybe a young Gustafer, I don't know, potentially. But these are our users, so you'll see a few of those going around. Cool. So we're gonna play, as we go, we're gonna do there's a little game. We're gonna collect some things along the way. I encourage y'all to think, again, putting ourselves in the seat of an application dev who's kind of new to this, maybe understands some of the motivations of the protocol, but not the technical parts. Let's think about everything out there as building an SDK. Let's think about the protocol and the network as itself kind of a software development kit for building apps. So we're gonna discover and collect some pieces of that SDK as we go. So right now we have none. And another thing, just before we really dig into it, I'm gonna make references to Statusphere. This is an example app that's out there. I'll link it later. But this is useful to reference because it kind of has a feature set, and I want to give a sense for what this application does. If you're not familiar with it, you log in as yourself. You click these emojis, and they become your status. So every user has a status. It's a single emoji. You click it. It updates your status. Down here, it gives a log of everyone's changes. Unfortunately, I didn't get a screenshot with multiple users changing their statuses, but if you logged in, I would see yours here too. Does that make sense? Cool. So I'll reference Statusphere here and there, and you can picture an app with this kind of functionality. All right, this is kind of an important one for application devs. What's a user? How does identity work? We have an answer to that. That's part of the protocol. We use decentralized OAuth, or we use our flavor, an app-proto profile of OAuth. The kind of setup here we have is, we have a bunch of apps, so anyone can go build an application. And then we talked earlier about how people are, we kind of punched the primary source data out of the application space. We put them in these servers over here, and those also can act as identity providers for the user. So we have this kind of end-to-end thing. We have a bunch of apps over here, a bunch of identity providers. Every user theoretically could have their own identity provider. And then the cool thing we get is single idea of user identity, a single unified idea of user identity despite all these parties being involved. So let's dig in a little bit. Yes, so what does that look like? So we have a user over here, a young Gustafer, and then two applications. We have the Statusphere app and then a variant, I already regret calling it this, the Datasphere app. It's one of those things you make your slides and you're just like, I need a placeholder here, and then like it becomes too late to like change it all, and they're rendered to pings, and then I can't update them. You get it. So, okay, we have two applications. We have one user, and then on the right we kind of have like the network. And in the network is a place where that user lives. So the kind of user story here, the goal is to get that user logged in, and then presumably set ourselves up to do some interesting things. So what does this look like? The user, this is very high level. Well, we can look at what this actually looks like concretely. The user's gonna go initiate like an authentication flow with the app. The app is gonna get in a flow with that user's identity provider. And then the user will be there, they'll put in their credentials, log in, maybe go through a consent screen. Anyways, I'll show that later. And then what does Datasphere get back? Two things. The first thing they get back is the user being authenticated. So Datasphere knows who that user is. They know who they're talking to. They can tell it is this particular young Gustafer. So that's the sense of identity. And then the other thing there is a credential. And the credential is is what we're gonna use to do some interesting things later, which we'll go over. So you this OAuth flow, you get two things. Authentication, who am I talking to, and a credential to do some stuff. That user might go to another app, say the more generic Statusphere app. And they go through the exact same flow, and what does Statusphere get? Same idea. They get this kind of proof of who they're talking to, young Gustafer, and then a credential. The cool thing is, this sense of who are we talking to is the same in both of those apps. So those two apps are not coordinating in any way, aside from using the user's identity provider. And again, yeah. So they share this idea of who they're talking to. So this is kind of like almost implicit linking of accounts throughout the whole atmosphere or something like that, which is a pretty, you can imagine, get your product, get your heads turning. What can we do with that? Cool. Same identity in each app. And as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, like that identity is called called a DID, a little string, and that identifies the user. And it's not gonna change. It's tied to that user for life. Great. Now, just to underline this a little bit, just to be like, okay, yeah, there's like a lot of multiple apps, but there's also multiple identity providers. And there's not a ton to underline here, but I just want to like point out, yeah, we get two users. They log into the Datasphere app independently. They each have their own identity. They each have a separate credential. And this app is essentially collecting them. Got this nice Rolodex of all of its users. Got a collection of credentials that it can use to do interesting stuff on behalf of those users. Yeah, so this is, you can see there's a very low coordination, very low coordination thing. And this is all, what makes a lot of this possible and safe is a bunch of, pretty heavy duty security features, honestly, which we won't get into here. So for most people, what's the first, traditionally, what's the first step of implementing OAuth? Like, if you wanted to go implement login with GitHub in your app, what's the first thing you would do? Manual client registration is the answer. I don't know how many of you have had to do this. Yeah, can you, show of hands, manual client registration? Yeah, so how does that work? Well, I'm not gonna go into it, but these are the pages from the GitHub documentation for what to do, right? So let's just observe, like, that's not going to work, right? My app cannot I cannot log in to every identity provider for every user and register my application with it. It's just a non-starter. This is not low coordination. So, boo, no, we don't like that. We don't like that. It's not fun. It doesn't work in this setting. On the flip side, what we have with this decentralized flavor of OAuth is dynamic client registration, a form of it that can be done on the fly. So this is kind of the interesting thing about OAuth. It's about user identity on one hand, but it's also about client identity on the other. Like these are both covered by OAuth. So if you've ever gotten in there, every client needs an ID to make the OAuth flows work. And what's our, in app proto fashion, it's a URL. We actually didn't invent this. This is not an invented here thing. This is something other folks have been working on. But what's cool is our client ID, if you just navigate to it, it describes the client, which is really nice. And so identity providers can look up all the details about the client. There are some fancy things you can do if you want to really lock down and authenticate your client. But actually, to get started, you're really just hosting a JSON document. It's pretty low key. That allows us to do cool stuff. Has anyone used Glitch? So Glitch is a platform where people write applications, and it's like forkable and remixable. But you might also just clone a GitHub repo down and run it somewhere. Also a way to fork and remix something. What's cool is this just works. You could take a project, you can fork it, or if you've ever run the Statusphere app, for anyone who's done that, you can just run it. You have a client. There's no coordination there. There's certainly no manual steps like this on another service. So this is really kind of special. Okay, so let's just get concrete about this. What does this actually look like? This is not meant to be like an impressive demo, but I just want to show what this actually looks like in practice. So this is an app. I'm in the app. I type my handle, divy.zone. I'm going to click login. Look at the URL bar. I'm now on bsky.social. This is my identity provider. And I get this consent screen telling me this app wants to know who I am. I select accept and click it. It brings me back to the app, and you can see it now knows, hi, divy.zone in the upper right. This is, in practice, what these OAuth flows look like. Okay, so there's Flavor Flav. This is highly speculative slide. I just want to underline that. So yeah, what I mostly want to say here is this has a very different vibe logging in with your handle as opposed to logging in with Gmail or some other provider you might log in with. I'm typing in my handle, and when I get onto that social application or whatever the experience is, I am that handle. There's this very one-to-one thing, and I think we're still learning what that means to users and how they take that. But my highly speculative thing here is Flavor Flav is not just going to log into your new app that you're hacking on with his Gmail, but if he's a Blue Sky user, he has this clear sense of his identity up here. He knows the deal, and yeah, he might type in flavorflav.bsky.social into your app and click login, and there's this sense that the whole user base, everyone who's currently in the atmosphere, is just so close to logging in to your app that you're working on. So I think we've really lowered the barrier to entry to get users into apps being built in the atmosphere, which is cool. A couple things I just want to advertise here. So there's a few things coming soon to extremely soon. On the extremely soon side, account sign-up flows on identity providers. So what this allows is, hey, today, in order, you're building an app, you want a user to sign up for the first time for your app, there's kind of a janky thing right now where you actually have to send them to the Blue Sky app, and they create an account there, and then they come back. That's not what we want, right? So now you'll be able to initiate a sign-up flow directly from your app on one of these identity providers, and they'll come back to your app logged in with their newly created account, which is cool. The other thing we need is account session management. So, hey, I'm logged into these 10 apps, or I'm logged into Statusphere and Datasphere, and I don't trust Datasphere anymore. So I'm gonna, there's gonna be a session management pane, very similar to what you'd find inside your Google account or something, and you can like revoke access from Datasphere. Eventually, identity management will also be in there, like managing your email, your handle, stuff like that. And then there is a proposal out on granular auth scopes. I'm not going to get into this too much, but that consent screen where it says, hey, this app wants to identify you, we'll be able to lock it down. And it could be like, yeah, they can only create Statusphere statuses, right? So you're going to log into that app. It's not going to be able to mess with your Blue Sky posts, for example. And so this is a protocol proposal that is out. All right, we collected our first thing, user identity and login via OAuth. So users have this sense of global decentralized identifiers, and OAuth authenticates users with our app and authorizes us to interact with the network as them. Great, our SDK is coming along. All right, so how do we do that, create and interact with stuff? Got a secret. The Atmosphere is pretty much just a big key value store. It's just a big distributed key value store. It has a particular shape to it. And most of what your app's doing is updating it. It's generally taking a key and updating it to a new value, or adding a new value, add a key, or deleting one. So yeah, what does this look like in practice? There essentially, if we kind of look on the left-hand side, every user has a database. It kind of has a location. So this is Daniel's, who we heard from yesterday. Within that database, there's a key. It has two parts. First part is like a namespace. Second part's an identifier. And then at that key, there's a value. In this case, you're looking at how Statusphere statuses are modeled. It says, hey, my status is a bee emoji. Here's when I created this. I am a Statusphere status. In practice, we have different names for this. The user's database, we call a repository. The key is a path, and the value is a record. So pretty much everything apps are doing is creating, reading, updating, and deleting these records. So pretty low-key model. It has some structure. So on the right, we've talked a lot about lexicons. This is a description, a schema of like, hey, what is a Statusphere status? Cool thing here, publishing a lexicon out there, describing a new type of data with its own semantics is your way of essentially extending the SDK of the Atmosphere for everyone else. So this is kind of a nice way of looking at it. It's like we're all collaborating on this giant SDK for building social applications together. Now we actually get to the flow. This is a pretty simple one. Young Gustafer wants a new status. Statusphere app, we're logged in, we have credentials. Gustafer asks Statusphere app to update their status, and Statusphere app is going to use that credential to update that little piece in the key value store. We're going to update, there's a key for young Gustafer's status, and we're going to update it to that bee emoji, for example. That's the flow. That's how you write to the Atmosphere. Take that credential you got from the OAuth flow, write to the user's host. All right, we have our second bit of the Atmosphere SDK. Cool. Writing records to the user store. Each user has a repository in the shape of a key value store, data fitting lexicon schemas. You can publish your own schemas for others to use. All right, so how do I develop features from this kind of primary source key value store thing out in the Atmosphere? So, not all, in my app, not everything necessarily has the shape of a record, right? For example, here, young Gustafer's like, what are the most popular statuses? What's going on out there? The answer to that question isn't just a record out on the network. We have to kind of derive that and figure it out. So we have this idea of sync. So apps are going to synchronize that key value store locally. Do I have a thing here? Yes. Locally, so here, I'm going to do that again because it was cool. So someone updates their status. What goes on? Status for your app essentially has a WebSocket. It's pulling changes from the atmosphere. This status comes through. I put a little credential thing in there because that status, I can tell whose it is. I can verify whose it is. And when it comes through, the database spins because our database, owned by the Statusphere app, is getting updated. And you can imagine doing this a few times and eventually kind of deriving, having whatever business logic you need in your app to index these changes into your local database. And we can tell young Gustafer what the most popular statuses are. All right, let's zoom out just a little bit, move that whole thing to the side. And there are other users out there, right? So we have this other user on a different app, on the Datasphere app. They're going to write to the atmosphere, and then notice nothing changed on the right-hand side yet, right? They wrote. Sometime later, it's going to come through and update our database. So notice that delay is kind of interesting. It opens up a couple natural questions. First, we said, it takes some time between a write and my app syncing it. So natural question, can users immediately see their own interactions? Like, if I update my profile, can I immediately see that in the app? The other question that you might be wondering here is, when I deploy my app for the first time, there's all sorts of existing statuses out on the network that already exist. So how do I bootstrap my data with all that historical data that's already happened? First, yes, users can see their own interactions. That write came from your app, right? The user's on your app. So you observed that write commit to the network, and it's up to you. You can choose to optimistically show that to the user. That could happen in a couple different ways. That could happen just optimistic state in the client, or it could happen on the server. If you really need to fold that write into a bunch of different views of your app, you can essentially get it into your indexing path. There's a really cool tool here that I think are underexplored. I just want to call out. Every time you write to your repository, every time a write happens, there's a little revision number that gets incremented, basically, that always moves forward. So we see over here an operation on a path, basically a change to that big key value store, and it has a revision associated with it. So what you can kind of do is say, hey, is this write, if I'm experiencing writes out of order for whatever reason, maybe I did some fancy optimistic stuff in my app, and I observe another write, is it newer than the data I have on hand? And you can use that as an easy way to do to coordinate that and try to get consistent with the network again. I'm not going to go into that, but anyone working on this, look closely at repo revisions as a way to do this. So on bootstrapping the app with all historical data, what do we want to do? What's the general thing we want to do? We want to say, all right, who are all the users who have data that I'm interested in? I'm going to go to all the repositories and fetch it and then index it. The question is how do you do that? This is where we have some more coming soon stuff. So for that first step where you want to enumerate all repositories that contain records you're interested in, we're going to offer this essentially on our relay. List repos by collection. So you're going to give it a collection that you're interested in. It's going to give you a bunch of users back who have that collection. I really suggest this pattern. This is me speaking personally. Have a profile record for your app. Use that to advertise. Who are users of your application? Have a lexicon that describes that, because then we can hinge a bunch of stuff off of it. We have this very clear sense of who the users are of the apps. And then this is the really more speculative, less finalized. But we want when you fetch a repo, we want you to be able to provide a prefix that says, hey, give me all the records with this prefix. Again, I'm speaking in the key value sense, this prefix of these keys. And that will allow you to efficiently sync only the records that you're interested in. So this is like almost baked. All right, syncing live and historical data. I realize I'm time aware, so I'm going to get through the fourth here. Cool. So great. There's a question here. Where is that credential going to be held? Does the server or the client handle writes to the network? So I've been speaking about apps very generally, but really they have different parts, right? Some of it's running on the user's device near the user. Some of it's running in the server near our database. I have a choice. I can have that OAuth flow give me a credential on the device or on the server. This is like one of the big questions. When it's on the client, that's called the browser-based model. And this is like I'm building a single-page app with React, Vue, Lit, stuff like that. In order to get this to work, I still need to authenticate with my backend, right? So there's like the credential made it to the front end, but I need to authenticate with the backend. So we have a special facility for that. The Blue Sky app actually uses this service proxying, where you make a request proxied through the user's host, and that authenticates with the backend. Yeah, in this case, like read after write, if like I want to read my own writes as the user, that'd be optimistic state in the client. All right, we just got the fourth. This is like authenticating with other services. So we made this, in this slide, we made this call from our front end to our back end, and we proxied it in order to authenticate with the back end. That's cool. The cool thing about this is it extends to any service. You can authenticate with other services too, not just your apps. We actually do this in the Blue Sky app to stitch together our service for chat and our service for the Blue Sky API, which is kind of interesting. And then closing thought here, when the credential's held on the back end, this is called the back end for front end model. And this is like, hey, I literally want to post an HTML form, and I want to render HTML back to the user. So, you know, if anyone's having fun with HTMX. Also, trends, server-side rendering, server actions in frameworks like Next or React Router. Like these, you want like the credential on the back end. So there's no need for service proxying in this case. You can just do like a kind of a traditional auth flow. And read after write can hook into the indexing paths on the server. Cool, I'm going to skip some of these. So yes, these are decisions in your hands as an app dev. You have kind of broad choice of technologies, right? AppProto is not incompatible with any language or database technology or anything like that. And you also have to make this designation about your app architecture, right? You can do all this work on the server or the client. So AppProto is legible to two places for app devs on the boundary of your app. So what's on the boundary of my app? It's like the user getting into my app and logging in, writing, and syncing. But within there, I can kind of choose whatever I want. So over here, we have this kind of aura around the Statusphere app, which is kind of the atmosphere. It's only on the edges. And on the inside of my app, I can use Next, I can use HTML, I can use whatever new thing I want. And the other place AppProto is legible is we need more creative thinking around how to leverage the open network and identity. There's kind of this, I'm not going to go into these, but there's kind of this broad spectrum here. Like as you get more specific, from like the soup to nuts, I have a BFF, a backend for front end with its own full generic indexes. And on the other hand, I have these like shared network services that we maybe are all sharing, and I don't own the indexes. And there's like a whole bunch of stops in between, and we need to do a lot more experimentation here and figure out how we like to build. Great, so if you want to build, here are some places you can begin. Blue Sky SDKs, there's a great SDK by Mary, which does all sorts of stuff, client SDKs and OAuth. There's a guide for building that Statusphere app, start to finish. And then for the sync stuff, check out the Firehose. There's a great SDK by Future out there. Cool, thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Thank you, Devin.